every day I'm a little bit more bothered by what I see happening in social media, as well as what I see happening in all of these cities across the United States of America. And I think that we all can agree that it's getting worse, or it seems like it's getting worse. I mean, I'm an 80s baby. I was born in 1982. And I do remember people getting robbed for their Jordans. And then back then also, it was a lot of gang wars. It seems like even in the music, it was Crips versus Bloods, and it's not as bad. I don't believe it's as bad as it is now, though. Because today, not only do we have the proliferation of social media, but we have people basically advocating for this by saying that we need to defund the police, redivert funds from our budgets in order to basically send social workers, or at least that was the pitch when y'all was supporting Black Lives Matters. And I know ain't nobody gonna come out and say that they were supporting Black Lives Matters now, but they made millions of dollars off of y'all. But I don't see Al Sharpton and the women that were heading up Black Lives Matters that really wasn't for the organization, but was toasting champagne to make sure that they was running the bag up. And we haven't really heard anything about that, but neither here nor there. We'll get to that in another show. I don't see people really advocating for Black lives or colored lives or lives at all. Because when you go to these cities and you head over to Oakland, maybe even Chicago, and Chicago has been on fire for a long time. Come over to the red zone over in Detroit. Head down to South Florida. I'm not talking about Miami Beach. And then you go over to even some parts of Texas and New York and Memphis and all across the United States of America. And it basically is happening in blue cities. You see a proliferation of children that are basically becoming monsters. And these people are the future of what our society is supposed to look like. Now, it's a multi-level approach of what we're supposed to do in order to solve this problem, but I don't even think that anybody is willing to have the uncomfortable conversation. I mean, let's take, for example, in Chicago, recently, 73-year-old man, former bomb technician and retired police officer, was killed in his front yard in broad daylight.
The family of the 16-year-old accused killer leaves court just moments after the teens detained in connection with the slaying of retired Chicago police officer Larry Newman. Lazarius Watt turned himself in over the weekend and has been charged as an adult with first-degree murder for the shooting death of the veteran lawman. Investigators say it was Thursday morning when Watt and another gunman approached Newman outside his West Garfield Park neighborhood home as he was in the process of paying someone for helping to mow his lawn. That's when the unidentified gunman yelled freeze and grabbed for the victim.
The victim backed up and reached for his own gun when the co-defendant shot the victim. As witness one ran to escape, he observed the defendant aim his firearm at the victim.
According to prosecutors, Watt was on home confinement at the time of the murder and had more than a half dozen violations since being placed on electronic monitoring 6 months earlier. The teen was set to be arraigned in juvenile court today on a carjacking charge. The 73-year-old managed to get off one shot but was hit twice and later died of his injuries at an area hospital. The suspects ran away. Many consider Larry Newman a hero after he pushed the landscaper out of harm's way as the gunfire erupted. But for others, the part-time pastor and longest-serving explosive specialist with CPD is being remembered for his love of the community.
Larry was used to sacrificing his life for others. He's used to serving for others. He did that for his family. He did it for his church. He did it for his community.
The search for a second suspect seen in surveillance video continues.
Broad daylight, paying a person that was basically cutting his lawn and supporting the community, had recently, not even recently, but committed himself to the church. He was dedicated to his community. Everybody loved him, all of his neighbors. And when he was killed, people were absolutely broken up about it. And if you look at the footage that they shared with us, that basically highlights who it was that killed them, you already know that they fit the description. And I hate to say it because, again, don't nobody really want to have the uncomfortable conversation. But crazy hair, walking around with black hoodies on in the middle of the summertime. I know that Brandon Johnson calls it large gatherings, but where two or more is gathered, there he is in the midst of thee. And I'm not talking about God in that instance. I'm talking about the devil. Because they took this man's life. And they absolutely upended a lifetime of community service and dedicating himself to the people, all for what? We don't even know why. We know that finally the people in the community decided that they wanted to band together and get these guys turned in. One of them was still on the loose as of the recording of this video, but one of them turned himself in because they've caught surveillance footage of these people walking around doing some of the worst things for us. Now, the interesting thing about it is that being raised in this social media era, as far as a lot of these young guys and these teenagers that are taking lives, you know that cameras are everywhere. I mean, there's Ring cameras and security cameras, and a lot of these cities now that they're doing away with the police, they basically are convicting y'all or putting up y'all picture. And I even see social media accounts that is dedicated to highlighting shoplifters and people that are doing the worst in the community. And you know that these cameras exist. And so they walking around with no masks on, and they don't really care who sees them, and they talking about their ops and they rap about it in the music. And that's why I think that it's worse than ever, because it's not that crime didn't exist. It's not that people didn't do bad things. It's not that we didn't have a problem with the raising of our communities in single parent households, which ultimately lead to the worst in society. And I think that that's a whole nother subject that we need to tackle also. It's not that these things don't exist. It's not that we don't know about it. It's that it's getting worse. It's getting exponentially worse. And instead of us addressing the root cause of the problem, and then we also need to make sure that we vote accordingly. And then before we send our children to school, to go over there and tear up in the community and then make our teachers overglorified babysitters, we need to fix home. I'll give you another example. It was a robbery recently over in Beverly Hills. That's his social media. It's a hot topic of the day, right? And basically it was 4 teenagers and one 23-year-old that robbed a man whose car had broke down in the middle of the street. Rare collector's car. Broad daylight, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, sun is out. And then they run up on this guy and they rob him for his Rolex. And people are pulling out their cameras and they driving by and they capturing these people. Well, eventually the police captured them because the person that was recording them just so happened to be somewhat tied to the police department or a civilian that was in law enforcement or something like that. It really doesn't matter.
Happened on Thursday night right before 5 o'clock, so there were plenty of witnesses.
Oh!
A robbery in progress right in the middle of Wilshire Boulevard near Willamette Drive in Beverly Hills.
The suspects approached the victim and presented a firearm and demanded his Rolex watch.
The victim had been waiting for a tow truck to load his specialty car when the men jumped out of their vehicle with a gun.
It just so happened to be that a City of Beverly Hills employee, one of our traffic control officers, was arriving on scene of that tow and saw the crime in progress and immediately got on the police radio to our communications center.
High-tech Beverly Hills PD has a real-time watch center where virtual officers monitor their citywide camera system.
They immediately accessed the cameras to the area in which the crime, and they were able to identify the suspect vehicle driving away.
A short pursuit ensued, and eventually all 5 suspects from Oakland, California were arrested.
They wound up capturing these guys, and when they started to identify exactly who it was that was committing these crimes, it was teenagers. We see sideshows. We didn't call them sideshows. We called them basically people that was doing burnouts and the races here in Detroit, right? Sideshows is basically taking over the Bay Area and San Francisco and all parts of California, Los Angeles, Sacramento. And it's also happening down in Florida and Chicago and all of these places. And basically they shutting down bridges and people are getting injured and they destroying neighborhoods and streets. And so I have to ask myself this question, and I say, well, whose fault is it? Because the first people that we decide that we want to blame is we want to blame law enforcement. But then we tied law enforcement's hands from being able to do what they're supposed to do because y'all said defund the police, and then y'all start leveling secure penalties against the police department or police officers when they decided to do their jobs, even though police officers nationwide have been losing their lives. Okay, so let's go up the chain of command. Then they started blaming legislators, but the legislators are a reflection of the people that voted them in. And so when they create these laws and these judges and these city council people and they elect these people into office, they're basically doing your bidding. I mean, take Brandon Johnson, for example. He never said that he wasn't going to do exactly what he's doing. I mean, he's a horrible mayor, and we definitely going to have an award for the worst mayor of America, but it's not like he's doing anything other than what he said that he was going to do. Take money away from the city, get it over to the migrants, don't necessarily help the police department. Chicago, as of the recording of this video, again, is down over 2,000 police officers, but they definitely going to have the Democratic National Committee go there. And Biden is going to be over there pitching y'all, right? They're going to make sure that he gets your endorsement and nomination. And I know that they building Obama's presidential library over there, but Chicago is in shambles, and it's the young people. It's the young gangsters. It's the young people that's taking over. And they ruining the community. And they absolutely destroying everything. And I don't know how you guys are not really engaging the root core of the problem, because it's not just the legislators. It's not just the police officers. It's not just the judges. It's not just Gavin Newsom over there in California being very lenient. And when I say lenient, I mean lenient as far as making sure that they punish these people. I mean, the California budget just passed and they already defunding the prisons. And I'm not saying prison is the right way to go alone, but there needs to be severe penalties and consequences for your actions. And if you're just out here doing what you want to do when you want to do it, how do these people expect to ever be held accountable? Or how will you ever say that you're not going to do it if you don't feel like it's any penalties that come along with your behavior? And so while we sitting here having conversations about whether or not the teachers are doing what they're supposed to do in order to educate your children, it starts at home. It starts at home. And there's too many single parent households. There's too many congratulations of women that are having children out of wedlock with the same men. And it's a small majority of the men that are populating the majority of these single parent households. And then you tell me that it's okay as long as they raise with love. I stood on business the other day and, we did a Let's Rant about it. And I stood on business and I said, listen, man, we don't break up the family. It's a commitment to your children when you decide to have children in order to put them in the best position possible. And when I scrolled down, because it was clipped up and then it was put on Instagram and I seen it and they tagged me and it was awesome. Shout out to Randy. And I seen all of these people that was basically advocating for single parent households. I said, we got a cultural problem. It's not just a black problem. It's not a white problem. It's not an Asian problem. It's a cultural norm for us to advocate for people to break up their families and their households and for people to be raising these children and co-parent, not marrying before they carry. And then we deal with the ills and the woes of society. And next thing you know, it's a 73-year-old man that's getting killed in Chicago. And then another man is getting robbed for his Rolex in traffic in the broad daylight over there in Beverly Hills. And then we have basically a war against society that's largely being held by younger people, teenagers, children. And then we wonder what's the problem. We want to hold everybody accountable except for looking in the mirror. Every time that you look out the window and you point the finger, but you're not looking in the mirror and doing the same thing, you're part of the problem. I'm so tired of people telling everybody else what it is that they're supposed to do, but ain't nobody got their households together. How is that possible? How is it a thing that you can hold somebody else accountable for what you're not doing? I guess that's a cultural norm also. We do it in relationships. We do it with regard to our finances. We out here capping, acting like we good parents when we're really not. And we need to change the way that we go about doing things. I think that there's a segment of the population that's already done. It's already through. You can't reach them. You can't reach them. If you want to do any work, then you're going to have to do it with the children. And I mean the young children. You got to put it into them when they're young. Even when you disciplining kids, you can't discipline them once they get past a certain age. They don't even hear you no more. It has to come from the people that is doing the good work, but then at the same time, they are ensuring that our society continues to move forward by being better parents. And I think that it's a silent group of people, a large majority of the people that are doing some really great things, and they raising their children and they dedicating themselves and they sticking around for the kids and they seeing it through. They understand that it's not about you once you have children, it's about the children themselves. But then there's another group of people that are selfish, and they are usually the loudest ones in the room. And then more importantly, those are the ones that are committing the crimes. And then I have to be looked at as crazy when I say the uncomfortable, I have the uncomfortable conversation. And I say that, well, if I have to raise my child right, and then I got to worry about your kids stealing my kids' hubcaps, that's not cool. But at some point, we're going to have the uncomfortable conversation, and we're gonna have to get down to the truth, or we're not, and we're just gonna let this society continue to devolve into the worst thing for us, and just let it go to waste.